Are you seriously going to eat, you fat blibbity blabbity blob?
I mean, some of you might be like,
continual.
why would I want to start this?
Sensitive. She's sensitive.
You are listening to the Tami Talks Unscripted Healing Podcast, where we share stories that are, you guessed it, unscripted.
That's the thing, this journey doesn't stop.
It doesn't really
right?
end. We have a general sense of the topic each episode, but really the whole point is just to show up and be authentic and let our inner child speak its truth. And I have continued to work through that story of constantly hearing, well, we don't want, got a hot dog on our hands. Yeah, guess what, Mr. Sabatsky, you do. So I'm so excited that you are here, and it is my hope that you hear yourself somewhere in the story so that way you can feel seen and heard as well. So let's start talking. Hiya, folks. Yes, this is me doing a shameless plug for my kids' vitamins because I am a registered dietitian. Some of you may or may not know because I rarely talk about that, but that is my background. And I think that's what you're supposed to do on podcast is promote things that you love. And so I am. I ordered these for the kiddos a few months ago. Wanted to try something that was a lot cleaner because unfortunately there is a lot of junk out there and we think because it's out on the shelves that we can trust it. I'm sorry, you can't. There's a lot of ingredients that our body's like, what the hell is this? What are these food colorings? What is this additive and all of these things? So I want to make sure I know what I'm putting in my kiddos' bodies. And so I did some research and found these vitamins, gave them a try, and the kids have loved them ever since. I'm not going to lie. I actually sneak them sometimes myself. I should probably get my own. So looking for an adult multivitamin sponsor. Thank you. Anyone who wants to do that. But I love these because of the vitamin and mineral profile that are perfect for kids. Obviously, like they're pediatrician approved and all of those things. But when I look at the colors, this is a big thing. And you see it in so many of our food products. The strawberry flavor in here is beetroot. The apple is from spirulina and turmeric. So there are ways to get around those things and still make these things palatable and interesting for our kids. And like I said, both of my kids, it's like their little habit now. They grab their little Hiya jar and then they get sent in these little boxes. And so they empty out the little package into their little jar. And so packaging wise, this company is just very responsible around. And this week we actually got their probiotics sent to us to sample, and Aria was like pre-approved. So there's probiotic and prebiotic because we gotta feed those healthy gut bacteria too. And so I could have a whole podcast on just vitamins and probiotics and things like that. I was very excited about this, and like I said, Aria approved, which is a big deal because she's kind of a stickler on food and things. So if it got Aria's approval, you're good. I actually wanted her to do this commercial, but we are not there yet. So she has just given me the thumbs up and that I can officially share them. So I will post the link in here so you can get the little dealio if you want to have your kids give them a try and then also maybe sneak some yourself. So, all right. Back to the episode. Welcome to the Tami Talks Unscripted Healing Podcast. For those of you that are returning once again, thank you very much. And for those of you that are hitting play for the first time, thank you for being the brave soul to hit play. I hope you all get something out of this episode. And this week, I am coming to you with another solo episode. I was really hoping that this would be the week that I get to drop that announcement episode for you. But once again, I'm leaving you in suspense. But don't worry, it is coming. It is coming. And actually, it felt good to sit down this week and share some very recent stories, like happened yesterday kind of things. And it was funny because all week I kept thinking about what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? And there were lots of things that I could talk about, but I know that it needs to be this intuitive hit. It needs to be this, I feel it in my bones kind of thing I want to talk about. I'm not someone like I can just have a list of topics. I mean, I can riff on anything. Give me something and I'll turn it into an inner child healing moment. Absolutely. I even did that with my daughter in laundry recently, where I asked her to put it away. And when she did, I was like, how did that feel? And she's just like, I knew I should have made my own toast because that was why I was in her room, is because I was delivering toast. And so she's like, why does this have to be a healing moment, Mom? I'm like, because everything is. Anyway, that's not the point of this. But there were some things that happened recently that I feel like could be helpful to share. And so this morning it became pretty clear that what I wanted to talk about was signs that you know you're healing, because when we think about other ways that we improve our health, they're more in your face, things that you can measure. Let's say you're trying to improve your health and all of a sudden you're losing weight and you base your progress on the number on the scale, right? Which I could create a whole episode around that. And I might have early on when I think I shared an episode about how your your inner child is sabotaging your weight loss or something like that. I don't know. I'll link it. It was a really good one. That was very early on. That was one of the first 8. But you have those measurements of progress and success, right? Like, oh, I lost weight, or oh, I quit drinking. Things that are very clear in your face, on paper, you can see them. Healing is not like that. And that can make it really hard for people to appreciate the work that they've done. It can make it really hard to believe that they are doing anything, especially when healing is like this constant cha-cha where you feel like you've taken 2 steps forward and all of a sudden you're taking this step back, and oh, it's this exhausting dance. And you really, really do have to be able to pause and take in those moments to see where in your life have you actually made progress. And that was something that became very clear to me this weekend in a lot of different ways, with myself, with my kids. And so I thought that could be today's episode. And so for the algorithm, we're like, top 5 ways you know that you're healing. Everyone's going to click on that, right? And you're like, no, it needs to be a sexier topic. Well, anyway, hopefully that'll get some of you to click and actually think about this. Because when we think about healing, you are never going to be perfect at this. It is not about being perfect. And if anything, that is part of healing, is to realize and appreciate that it's progress. It's all just progress, even sometimes when it doesn't feel like it. It's about noticing these little changes, noticing these subtle shifts, noticing when you're reacting different, noticing that you're responding versus reacting, and all of those kinds of things. But these really are the biggest signs that you are healing, is sometimes these really, really small shifts, but you have to be able to slow down to notice them and to be quiet with yourself and really reflective and taking those moments. And that's sometimes the hardest part, is we're not taking that time, right? Because we all have 18,000 things to do in our everyday, and we're not always taking that time to go within and to have that little talk with ourselves or with God, and just like, okay, this just happened. How did I respond? How did I react? How did I feel? All of that kind of stuff. And so that's a little bit of what I wanted to talk about today. And I'll share some stories and things. And it's so funny because I have this top 5 list right now, and I'm already getting in my head because, like, oh, this feels scripted. It's not. It's literally just but so I don't know how this will come out, because I don't want to have an outline in my head, because that's when I get in my head. Anyway, so the top 5 ways that stood out to me right away, and I'll go through each of these and share some stories, is that your response time slows down. We aren't so reactive, that we've been able to take that pause. And I've mentioned that on this podcast many times about how we need to take that purposeful pause. How can we feel the trigger and notice it, sit with it, do what we need to do before we respond, before we react, and then do something, say something that we didn't really mean, and now we've hurt people or ourselves, or abandoned ourselves. That's possible too. So your response time slows down. You choose curiosity over judgment. This is a big one, which I'm happy about, because the judgment sucks. We all have that inner critic that is so mean. And so being able to sit in curiosity is good. When we can celebrate progress and not perfection, and you absolutely have to release perfection on your healing journey. There is no such thing. And when you can give yourself grace, meet yourself with compassion and understanding, so much better. And when you can hold 2 truths at the same time. And I'll explain those a little bit more in detail here in a second. And then I shared this one a little bit, is that you can repair versus retaliate. You now know how to respond versus react. And I'm going to add a bonus one, is that you now feel comfortable. And actually, I'll even go as far as to say crave alone time, that you crave that solitude, that you crave that one-on-one time with yourself and with your source, to be able to really sit with those questions. And so I may or may not come back to some of those if I remember, but those are the ones that I wanted to talk about today. And when I think about why this came up for me and why I wanted to talk about it, because for those of you that follow me on social media, I shared on Monday. You're going to be watching this on Tuesday, so now a week has passed. If you're one of those tune in Tuesday people, otherwise you hear this when you hear it, and the timeline does not matter at all. But I recently shared that my divorce was finalized on April 21st. And it had been a long time coming, right? It didn't happen overnight. So there's been a lot of work, a lot of healing, a lot of emotions that have been felt and processed and all of those things throughout the last year since we had filed, but especially over the last 5 years when that box was open. And that's when I realized, I can't ignore this anymore. And then I tried the whole thing of losing myself in work and all that stuff. And I thought about talking about that this week because I do want to open up more about that process, because there were a lot of people that reached out to me after I shared that post and kind of what that looked like for me and my now ex. And just trying to give some hope that there can be healing and that these things don't have to end horrifically, that you can still maintain some sort of love and respect and kindness and compassion for one another. And I could have talked about that today, but I feel like I need to be a little bit more grounded in that. And it still feels very fresh, even though, like I said, it's been a long time coming. But I just wanted to be really mindful and really intentional about how I share that message and how I can be of the most help and service in sharing that with the people that need that message, that are going through it, that whatever stage that you're in, because I've obviously been through all of them. And I know that initial stage when you're still very much in it and maybe don't know how to find your voice and don't know how to communicate that, like, I can't do this anymore, and you don't know what to do, that stage is real hard. So again, I just wanted to think about how that episode, or several episodes, part 1, part 2 is going to come out. So I wasn't going to talk about that today, but there are aspects of that I do want to share within this how do you know you're healing kind of thing. And so, like I mentioned, it had been quite the week of waiting for that emotional cloud to come. And that's probably part of it. Is I knew that day was coming. I was trying to emotionally prepare myself for it, right? I didn't want to get hit by a truck. I knew that this was probably going to be an emotional release, that having some sense of closure was going to feel good, but also maybe bring about a bunch of other emotions. And I wanted to make sure that I felt safe and supported and feeling all of those, because we never want to be blindsided by our emotions, because that's when ego swoops in with all of those coping strategies. I could have been in the kitchen, mindlessly binge eating. I could have been doing all of those old self-sabotaging things because my ego was fearful of the emotions it knew was coming. And this time I was like, no, like, I'm good. I can sit in these. I can feel these. I'm ready for it. Bring it. Bring it. So I worked out that morning. That was one way that I could support myself through some of those emotions. I knew that I had people I could call and text if I needed to. But I just felt that morning in particular, I just needed to really sit and be with myself. And that is part of this, is that while you are going through your healing journey, at first, that aloneness and solitude feels really lonely and really shitty. And you feel like a big old loser. But then you really start to crave it and honor it and find it sacred. And so I'm not afraid to sit alone with myself and with my emotions anymore, because I'm no longer afraid to hear what comes back. And I've shared that on other episodes before, is that when I first started this journey, or, years before that, I never felt comfortable being by myself. I think about times in college, I would feel like such a loser if I wasn't going out with my friends. And that's why I would eat 12 muffins in one night. I didn't want to feel that. But then even, as you become a mom, and in that initial stage where I didn't really know anybody in the current town that I'm living in, I felt really alone in that. And I also didn't know who I was. And so that feeling was really unsettling and really uncomfortable, because I wasn't ready to find out who I was. Because even in those moments, that probably was going to mean that something in my life needed to change. And if I wasn't ready to change that, then I don't even want to go there. And it wasn't until I remember buying my paddleboard and being out on the lake for the first time. It was a Friday night. And I was like, wow, like, this actually feels good. Like, I don't feel like a loser because I'm out on my paddleboard by myself on a Friday night. Like, I really enjoyed it. And I was like, am I having a little date night with myself? I am good company. Because I wasn't afraid to ask those questions anymore. I wanted to know. I wanted to get to that truth. But at that point, I had already started to accept some of these bigger life changes that I knew were going to happen, but I knew that I needed to do the work to be able to support the changes I knew were coming. And so much of that, I would say 99.9% of that is going to come when you are with yourself, when you are searching inside of yourself, because the more that I would search outside of myself for ways to fix the things in my life that I thought were broken, the further I got away from the thing I really needed to tend to, which was me and my inner child. And really my connection with God, with the universe, with all of the things that make me feel connected. And so I think that's a huge part of it, is going into what I knew was going to be an emotional day. I felt really safe in being able to feel all of them. And I was prepared to feel all of them. And I welcomed all of them. Like, bring on the grief, bring on the sadness, bring on the happiness, bring on the memories, bring on all of it. I was ready to feel all of it. And I did. And I had mascara all the way down my face. And I released through tears. So there were a lot of them. But there was a mix of them, right? It was a mix of all of it. It was a mix of what I just said, the saddest of sad, but the happiest of happy. I felt all of that because that's what happened within those 20 years. There was a lot of happiness, there was a lot of joy, and there was a lot of heartache, there was a lot of sadness, and I wanted to be able to feel it all. And that felt like the best way to honor that was to no longer suppress my emotions, to no longer suppress who I am, to no longer to deny that I'm someone who just feels it all, and someone that is highly sensitive to all of it, is to welcome all of it. And so that was something that happened this week that I felt like, okay, you are doing this healing work, Tami, because before you would have been out the door and 2 miles gone before you had to sit in any of those emotions, those hard emotions, because that's what I did for all of my life, was to run from emotions. I mean, I'd run right into the pantry, into the fridge. I mean, that's where I ran. Some of you ran other places, maybe into substances, or we start scrolling, or we do all of these things as a way to numb or to avoid our pain or our emotions. And there is, I don't know if it's a quote or it's a story, and I know many of you have probably heard about it, like the difference between, I think it's buffalo versus cows. I don't know. I've already butchered this. And if so, someone can correct me in the comments. But they run right into the freaking storm, right into it. Like, let's freaking go. Bring it. Because they know if they're going to run into the storm, you're going to get out of it faster, right? Rather than one, just stand there and wait for it to happen. Like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, it's getting darker. Oh, but you're not doing anything. You're literally just standing there waiting for this storm to come hit you. Or you take off running the other way. And now the storm is chasing you. So now you're running with all of this fear of, am I going to be able to get away from this? Am I going to be able to outrun it? Meanwhile, it's still chasing you. And so now you've just doubled the amount of fear and anxiety and all of that stuff, when really, if you could have just looked at it and been grounded in your healing, grounded in knowing where you're going, be like, I got this. Let's go. And that's kind of how Monday felt. It was like, okay, I got this. Let's do this. Whereas in the years past, I was running. I was getting the F out of here. There were certainly moments where I just stood there and I just looked at it. I didn't know what to do. I froze, right? Fight, flight, freeze, all of those things. I would freeze. And that happened many times, even within that process. And I shared that in that post, is that there were many times that both my ex and I went into fight, flight, freeze, and I was aware of it. Didn't mean I could always stop it, but could I come back in the moment or later and talk through it and find some resolution to be able to repair? Yeah. But that doesn't mean I was perfect. Oh my gosh, I was so far from perfect. And again, this needs to be its own episode, so I'm not going to dive into all of it. But those were certainly ways that I could tell that I was healing, is that this time it felt like, ooh, I was the buffalo. I was running right through that. Like, okay, I got this. I got this. So another one of those is also being able to choose curiosity over just immediately going into judgment and beating yourself up and throwing on all the guilt and shame and all of these things. Is like, whoa, 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 just let me sit in this. Let me get curious about why. Why am I feeling this way? And why am I allowing this? Why? And you don't want to get super caught up in the why. I'm like, I can get caught up in that all day long and then ask a million times. And I think that's been part of my growth and healing too, is to know when, okay, you need to stop asking the question. But when I can think about, why is this happening for me? How is this happening for me? It allows me to shift into curiosity versus into judgment. Like, oh, well, Tami, you haven't healed at all. Here you are again. Like, feels like you just wasted all this time. You wasted all this energy. Can't believe you're still in the same spot as you were before. We do that. And I had a coaching client this last week who very much felt like she was in that spot. Like, oh, I've wasted all this time. I haven't been doing anything to prepare for this next phase. And I'm just so frustrated with myself. And I was like, hold up. I was like, no. And I have it on recording, and at some point I'm going to make her watch that back, because there was like this huge shift when we realized, do you realize how much work you have been doing? And that's coming back to this episode of, you're not always going to be able to see, just because there weren't check boxes checked, because there wasn't certifications completed, because there wasn't this number or whatever. We don't think that we've done anything. When this woman has done so much freaking healing, like gone into the depths of her wounds over these past few months. And I think a lot of us now know that sometimes you get the biggest test before your biggest breakthroughs. And so I actually love it when we hop on a coaching call and they're at the like depths of like, oh, despair. Because I'm like, ooh, we're going to use this. We're going to use this. And I think it was on the holiday episode or the resolution episode where I talked about the arrow. And I use that probably so much because I'm a Sagittarius and that's part of our sign. But the arrow is, if you pull that arrow back and you got all this freaking tension, because that's where she was. Like, she was so frustrated with herself. Like, I haven't done anything over these last few months to prepare for this. Here I am again. I feel emotionally and physically and all the things. Like, am I depressed? That was the conversation. And if you just drop the arrow and just stare at it and look away, like, yeah, now you've done nothing with that. But when you can see that, you pick that arrow up and like, wait a second. Yes, I'm frustrated. Yes, I feel like I'm still in the same place, and that angers me. I don't feel good physically. I don't feel good mentally. I don't feel good emotionally. And now you have so much freaking tension on that. All you got to do is take aim. All you got to do is take aim and where that's going to go. And for some people, you may not know where that arrow is going to go yet. And that is the hardest part of being able to let it go, because you don't know where you want to aim that. Maybe you don't know what your passions are. Maybe you don't know what the next step is. And you won't release this until you know. And sometimes your arm is going to get so freaking tired because you don't know yet that you end up dropping it. When really, I think what God is asking us is, yo, I need you, pull that back, use everything that I've been giving you, because this is actually what you've been asking for. And I need you to trust, maybe even close your eyes, and that when you release this, I know where that arrow is going. I am pointing you. I am guiding you. Can you trust me? I hear a lot of people talking about their faith. And oftentimes, like, well, why does that stop when it comes to the next steps? You say you believe in God and you have this strong faith, but yet you are not taking that next step. You're not taking that inspired action. You are now that, this is not what I mean, but if it is the cow analogy, like, you're the cow just standing there. You're not doing anything with it because you're too afraid to release the arrow because, well, I don't know where it's supposed to land yet. I don't either, folks. I'm sitting over here behind this mic and I don't know where that arrow is landing. I know I pulled it back and I released it and that baby's still flying. I don't exactly know where God is taking it yet, but I released it because I realize that I have tried to have so much control. I'm either never releasing it or I'm getting so tired because I don't know quite yet that I'm just eventually going to drop it. But I had to know that all of these things were happening for me. All of the times I'd get frustrated, all the times I had these setbacks, it was all to be able to get tension on that arrow. So that way, when I did let go, when I did have trust and faith and knew that I could surrender all of it, that God's got me. And that arrow, where it goes, is not necessarily up to me. I don't have control over that part. I just have to trust that He knows where it's going. And it's going to land exactly where it was meant to, exactly where it was destined to land. And we need to have that kind of faith, that kind of trust. And so wherever you're at on your journey in trusting a higher power, sit with that. Where is that level of trust? Because it's one thing to say that we have faith and that we believe, but when you're really put to the test, where you have to surrender aspects of your life, I surrendered a full-time job with benefits to do God knows what in entrepreneurial world. And here I am, how many years later, doing Nothing that was on my radar at that time. Having to trust and surrender that ending our marriage, not knowing where that was going to take me, how that was going to look. All of these things with the podcast and this big announcement that's coming, all of it was, okay, I trust you. This is really hard and it's going to completely change my life, but I trust you. And that's probably the whole point. But holy crap, this is like to be really grounded in that faith and that trust. It's hard, but that's also to me a sign of healing and that I can do that. And now I can officially say in every aspect of my life. Yeah. And so it's really easy for me, and I'm sure a lot of you, to beat yourself up on all of these little things. And that was kind of last week's podcast, as I was getting down on myself for these little silly moments that were like, oh, why are you still doing this? But then when we really take that step back, like, okay, even that, noticing that, getting frustrated about that, right? That just helped me kind of pull tension back on that arrow again, because I didn't like that I was still in these little insignificant moments beating myself up so much because I disappointed someone, and that I would so quickly abandon myself to people please. And I was like, no, it brought it back to my attention. Like, Tami, you got to revisit this, tend to that wound. That wound, even if it were fully healed, there's still going to be a scar there, right? And so I'm not naive enough to think that wound is just magically going to go away overnight. I have to keep tending to it. I have to keep checking on it. That area may always be tender, even if it's healed. There's always maybe that scar tissue. And I think sometimes we get brought back to either help us fine tune things, to heal things a little bit more, or to help show us how much we actually have made progress, these non-scale victories. And that absolutely helped me going into this week and looking at things a little bit differently and really looking at, are there other areas in my life where I have been people pleasing and that I have been kind of swaying to keep other people comfortable or to not hurt their feelings or whatever it was. And I was able to find a few little spots. I was like, okay, Tami, you have not done this work to find wholeness within yourself to all of a sudden just let it seep out and create all these cracks in that vase again. And now you're back to the same old thing where you're pouring into yourself, but yet you have all of these cracks because you started people pleasing again. And so that last week's episode allowed me to see, like, ooh, did I rattle my foundation a little bit? Have I created some cracks in that vase? I just needed to tend to it. And I feel like that was helpful. And that is healing in itself, to have that awareness of like, ooh, I just maybe need to do a little self-check here. But there was things that were coming up where I allowed myself to just sit in that curiosity versus going right into judgment, right into shame and guilt, which is my default. Used to be. And so continuing to ask, okay, how is this happening for me? What am I supposed to be getting out of this? Whether or not it's something that's directly even happening to you, if you're impacted by it, there's something there for you, believe it or not. And that is what I took from this weekend was, okay. Sitting in that curiosity allowed me to find a gift in it. And it allowed me to see the work that I have done and that I'm okay. Like I'm feeling a little bit closer to wholeness, right? And I feel like we already are, but it's maybe removing the masks and the layers that keep us from that wholeness. It kind of keeps us a little bit disconnected from ourselves. And so I felt like, oh, this felt good. Like I got me. And I don't remember, I guess this does go back to that holiday episode or the resolution episode where I talked about the panic attack I had on Thanksgiving. And when I took off outside and could not catch my breath and could not stop crying. And little Tam Tam looked back to see if anyone was coming after her to see if she was okay. And when no one was, I stopped myself, and that's because I'm here. Big Tammy's got you. And that was kind of what happened this weekend, but in a different energy, more of a solid, grounded, I got you, girl. Like for real, not just in those moments of like intense panic, literally. But every day, even in those little moments, like, I got you, we're good, we're solid. And whoever comes in and out of our lives or whatever happens around us, like, we're good. And I needed that little reminder. And so even in that moment, being able to celebrate, okay, like none of that looked perfect. None of this looked perfect, but it is showing that there has been a lot of progress. And so I want you to think about if you were to just take a moment, where in your life can you start to celebrate some of these little improvements, these little subtle shifts? Maybe you found yourself taking a pause, or even you noticed that you were triggered. Like, oh, yeah. A couple weeks ago, Tami talked about what feeling triggered can feel like emotionally, physically, the pit in your stomach, the lump in your throat, the sweating, the wanting to lash out right away. Like, ooh, I felt that. I noticed it. Like that alone is incredibly healing. That's a great sign. Awareness is a big step, because if you're not aware of it, how are you going to change any of it? Right? So it's noticing when we're feeling triggered, giving ourselves that pause to not react, but pause so that way you can then respond when you're ready. And that I have found is that respond time is getting faster, which is good. That was my whole thing. I didn't want days and weeks and months to go by where I could then respond. Like, no, you can do this. And so it's been a good thing. One of the other little stories that I wanted to share around this that happened this weekend is just, I know I am healing when I see it in my kids, when I see what they're doing. And there was just so many cool moments this weekend. And there was a hard one too. This all happened yesterday. It was a really nice sunny day. Kids wanted to go out to the zoo. Like, all right, cool. And on our way down there, we're driving past my favorite little bakery. And it's about 2:00. And I know the bakery closes at 3 because I know these things. And if I'm ever on the street, I'm like, well, when on Monroe Street, like when in Rome, you gotta stop and get your gluten-free molasses cookie. So I just threw that out there to the kids, not caring if we did this or not. And because they love these little sweet potato donuts that they have. And Ari immediately was like, oh yeah, let's do that. That'd be great. And Arlo's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And this was pretty cool. This is pretty cool when this happened. And everybody knew what was happening. And this is where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, So Arlo's teacher a couple weeks ago had said that he was one of the most emotionally intelligent kids she had seen. And this is good stuff. So Aria wants to do something. Arlo doesn't want to do something. Aria knows how to work her little brother. She's good. And a lot of times it works. So she's like, hey, Mom, turn up the radio. This is a private conversation between me and Arlo. And he stopped her dead in his tracks. And he's like, I know what you're trying to do, Aria. I know you're going to try to talk me into going into the bakery by making some kind of little deal or arrangement with me. I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically that. He was like calling her out. I was like, no, don't do that, Mom. I know what she's going to try to do. And Aria is just like, oh, shit. If you can see my face, like she's like, oh man, he totally got me. And I looked back. Oh, there's more. So Arlo says this. He's like, I know what you're trying to do. You're going to try to talk me into going by creating some sort of little deal. And he goes, I get to make my own choices. And he was just like, don't manipulate me, basically. I can see right through what you're trying to do, and it doesn't feel good. I want to be able to do what I want to do, say what I need to say, be who I need to be, like all of these things. Like, don't do that. Don't play these games with me, is basically what this little 6.5-year-old was saying to his sister. And again, she just sat there like totally busted. And I just looked back and I looked at her and I was like, he's not wrong. And she couldn't even say anything because she totally agreed. Like, yeah, he full on busted me. So right there was this really good lesson of like, whoa, Arlo, like way to trust your intuition and to speak up. Wow, that was awesome. So that was one little moment we had on the way down to the zoo. And then we get to the zoo, and this is one of these moments that I am not very proud of, but here I am. I share whatever because hopefully it'll help someone, and that these little things can happen in such small, simple, subtle moments. And that's the reason I share these things, because it isn't always the big outbursts and events that create emotional wounds or childhood trauma. Like, it's sometimes these little subtle things. And then, because what I did yesterday could be like that little pebble of sand in your shoe. And if it happened over and over and over and over again, now I've created a massive wound in my daughter's shoe that she's now going to have to heal when she's in her 40s, about how Mom doesn't ever hear me or see me or whatever. I'm not worthy of her time and attention. So what happened, again, I'm not proud of this moment, but vulnerability is my strength and superpower. And I hope that people can learn from this. And I know this is why these things happen. So we're walking along in the zoo, and Arya started telling me this story about something that happened in school. And I'm listening and I'm engaged. And then all of a sudden, squirrel moment. And I would like to say my inner teenager took over because we were walking by the donkey area, if you will. And on one of the signs, I don't remember the name of this particular type of donkey. All I know is that it said whatever the name was, and then it said wild ass. So, of course, my immature teenage self was like, oh, I'm absolutely taking a picture by that, and I'm going to block out the first word. So all it says is wild ass on it. And so I did that. And so, like, again, not even thinking, total squirrel moment. Whatever Aria was saying was no longer where I was focused because I thought this would be funny to take this picture. And then got done taking this picture and then continued on. And I knew Arlo wanted to get on the carousel. And so we started talking about that. Did I come back and have Aria finish her story? Did she feel like, wow, were you even listening to me, Mom? That picture was way more important than apparently my story was. And her ego started to create that story, right? But she also wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong in that I completely just bloop, squirrel moment. This right now is more important. And I think about like, how many times are we doing that? This was kind of a silly story with the wild ass thing in it. But I think about just being after school, your kid's telling you a story and you start doing something else. Were you actually fully present and listening? And this is where I had to catch myself. And we talked later about this. Like, I'm glad that happened because sometimes we need those little self checks is that we need to know to stop doing the dishes, to stop folding the laundry, to stop whatever we are doing, to put our phone away, whatever it is, to just be really present, to making eye contact, to saying those things. Because I know what it's like to not feel seen and heard. That's like my whole freaking wound and story. And here I was doing it to my daughter, like, oh, no, no, no. So I know what that feels like, and I don't want her to ever feel that way. And so I was so glad we eventually figured out that that's why she got real upset when we were in the ice cream line and then decided that we would end up getting it later. And you should have seen the look on her face. And I'm thinking it's because, oh, Aria didn't get what she wanted in that moment. And so that was her way of throwing a little fit or a little tantrum, right? And I could have assumed that. I could have assumed that it was about the ice cream and that she wasn't getting what she wanted in that moment. But then when we stepped aside, and this is in the middle of the zoo, like right in that big old open area, and then she told me why. And it was because of the picture. So again, you got to go deeper. It's not always the things that we think is on the surface. It rarely is. It's usually something much deeper than that. The ice cream was just the final straw. It's what got her to, like, now we're really feeling it. Now she can't hide that she was upset. It's out there now. And I need to address it. But I also need to not just assume that it's about her not getting her way. And this is where I know that the healing work that I have done in creating a safe foundation to feel my own emotions has allowed her to feel safe in feeling her emotions and to also communicate them. And she communicated them all right in the middle of the zoo. And she let me know. She let me know, all right, why she was upset. And I couldn't blame her. I couldn't fault her at all. But here is what happened is I was trying to apologize right away because I knew, like, oh, wow, that felt shitty. You're right. That was incredibly immature of me and irresponsible and all of those things to cut her off in the middle of her story and take a picture in front of this stupid thing. It's so stupid. But it was still a big deal, but that we could address in the moment so it didn't turn into an even bigger deal. And so I was trying to apologize for that and kind of not necessarily explain why I did it. But then she kind of clamped on and, oh, now I was being the victim and all of these things. And I was like, no, I'm actually not. I'm trying to own the fact that you're right. That was kind of shitty. And then she kind of kept going. I was like, okay, I got it. I make mistakes. I'm human too. Anyway, we moved through that. And it was a good, like I said, checkpoint of you got to be present. And also, yeah, I am human and I make mistakes, and don't ever take a picture in front of a wild ass picture ever again. So anyway, we come home and the rest of the afternoon was great because we moved through it and we were able to let it go. If we wouldn't have addressed it, the whole afternoon would have had this heaviness on it and it just wouldn't have felt good. But luckily, we addressed it right then and there. So in that moment, that was so healing because we dealt with it, we moved through it. Boom. Neither one of us is holding on to icky energy from that. But I also knew that I wanted to come back around and talk about it a little bit later. And so the afternoon had went on. We both showered. We were sitting out on our little patio in the sun. And I said to her, I just want to talk a little bit more about this afternoon. And I had said to her too, you are absolutely right. And I'm so glad that you said something to me because honestly, it was such a silly squirrel moment, but I can absolutely see how that made you feel. And I am sorry. I am sorry. And I could apologize. Again, being able, healing. How you know you are healing is when you can apologize when you mess up. And that I didn't need to make all these excuses about why I did it or try to rationalize it or be the victim or turn it around on her. Like, no, I was just fully owning it. And then we started to talk a little bit about the victim thing and how she always goes there and accuses me of trying to play the victim in those roles. And I was like, I don't feel like I am. But I also said to her, I might initially go into that energy because that is most of our default, right? We want to go in and immediately defend ourselves. We want to try to fix it right away. That is that impulse. And so I told her, like, sometimes I might do that because that's my initial reaction. But if I can have a moment, I can sit back and own it. And I want to own it and I want to look at it. But sometimes, yeah, ego swoops in really fast and tries to deflect or tries to defend or tries to rationalize. And she will call me out on that right away. But we're also like, but I also don't know if that's actually what I'm doing. But then we got talking about how I have said many times to her that I just need to let her ego kind of spew at me because it tends to say some pretty hurtful things. And now I just know, like, okay, that's her ego. Well, then she's like, I don't like that you do that because those things that I'm saying in that moment is true. And you always say that it's just my ego. And I was like, okay. And then I didn't lose it. I felt it. And I told her that, yeah, maybe I do. Maybe by me saying that that's your ego saying those things is because I don't want to believe that you actually mean them. And that's easier for me, for my ego, to tell me that it's your ego saying those hurtful things because I don't want to believe that my daughter actually thinks those things of me and that thinks I'm this terrible mom. And I think then that hit her. And then she realized, like, oh, maybe. Because she's like, I don't think that, Mom. Maybe it is a little bit of my ego in those moments. And yeah, I do need to spew. And I think it does say hurtful things to try to get the point across. But I think you're right. So it was this really interesting moment where we both kind of realized some truths in that it wasn't just this black and white, but that there might be a little bit of gray in there. And because I do try to sift through the things that she says, like what is some truth in that? Did she mean for it to be that hurtful? Was that how she really feels? Or do I need to take little pieces of that and sit with it and reflect on it? And I think that is the case. And she kind of confirmed that. But it was interesting how her ego would be like, no, I said what I said and I meant it. When really she's like, no, it does come out a little bit harsher than I intend for it because I think my ego is trying to get the point across when really that isn't how I truly feel. And I made sure, I'm like, don't just be saying that because I'm over here in my feels. So it was just this really, like, this is my 11-year-old daughter I'm having this conversation with. And it was so beautiful. And again, just the energy between us afterwards was just so healing, so loving. And it felt like we're good. We're good. And we both knew that about each other. And we can have these tough conversations and be good. What was this little pebble that I now put in her shoe at the zoo didn't turn into this big thing because I never readdressed it, because we never talked about it. Because then I was never aware of how many other times I was doing this, that it turned in this little pebble, just kept irritating that wound and became this big thing for my daughter. Whereas like, no, we got that pebble out right away. And then we talked about it. Like, gosh, do you see what this could have done? Whew, good thing we removed that. Will it ever show up in her shoe again? Maybe, but same thing. Now we know how to move through this. And so I was like, whoa, that was such a cool healing moment with her. And then, because I told you yesterday was good. There was a lot of feels, a lot of emotions. This was my favorite. This was my favorite because this showed so much growth and healing in my kids. And that Arlo and I, we always go into Aria's room and we sing this little goodnight song. And it's the Tomorrow song from Annie, but instead of saying how does it? I can't even think of how it goes right now. We sing like, good night, we love you, good night. And then we, keep going. And I hold Arlo's hands and I direct them, and it's this funny little thing. And you can tell, like, Aria, even though she's seems annoyed by it, you can tell she actually loves it and kind of enjoys that little minute or two where we come in and say good night and we love you. Well, we did that. We walked in on her playing with Arlo's kinetic sand, which I loved. One, that she was playing with kinetic sand. Like, yes, please. That's such a great sensory thing. It's a great way to emotionally regulate. So I was like, woohoo, this is cool. Then Arlo's like, hey, that is my kinetic sand from my birthday back in August. It is now April. He's played with it a couple times since then, but immediately, like any kid, kind of getting territorial over stuff. Like, you didn't ask. You didn't ask to play with my stuff. And Aria immediately was just like, yeah, you're right. But she didn't really have a chance to say, I'm sorry, right? Because Arlo would have immediately reacted, right? Like, you didn't ask me. And here's what he almost did. So Aria had her makeup and brushes and stuff on the floor, kind of by the door. Arlo puts his foot. So here's the makeup brush, and Arlo, he puts his foot right by it. And Aria does not have any time or patience for you messing with her makeup stuff or really any of her stuff. And he knew. He was like, watch this. Watch me put my foot on your blush brush. I wanted to have thrown another B there, but that wasn't appropriate for this. That was kind of the energy he was putting off. It's like, oh yeah, you're going to play with my kinetic sand without asking me? Watch me put my dirty foot all over your brush. And Ari's like, Arlo, please don't. And he kept putting it right by, just that, like, back and forth, just teasing her, just poking a little bit. They like to poke the bear, right? And he just had this moment of, hey, Arlo, you know what's going to happen here, right? He was able to take that pause. He didn't let Hulk take over. He wanted to. Hulk was like right there. He's like, oh, give me this brush. Let me put my foot on this brush and I will destroy her. I will piss her off so much if I do this. Just let me do it. But he didn't. I could see him. Like, Arlo stayed there. He was so close. He was so close to teetering. And then we had said, like, well, I imagine Arya just went into the drawer and got it, not realizing that it was yours because it's been so long that we've gotten it out and played with it. And, I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. And Arya was like, yeah, I'm sorry, Arlo. I did forget that it was yours and I should have asked you. And I'm sorry I didn't. And all of a sudden, Arlo just like steps his foot away from her brush and he goes, it's okay. You can play with it. You're right. It has been a while, so I get it. And then what happened next was that Arya said, hey, Arlo, do you want to play with the kinetic sand tomorrow morning together? And Arlo was like, yeah, that would be great. So when you get done with it, bring it out on the table and we'll play with it tomorrow morning. And oh man, and she just saw him walking because he loves quality time with Arya. And if she's the one offering it, even better. So we lay down, we snuggle, and I was like, Arlo, can I just share something with you? He's like, yeah. Do you know what just happened back there? And he kind of perks up because I think he knew, yeah, that was good. And I walked it out with him. I shared with him, when this happened, and you could have went into this and you were about to step on the brush, but you didn't let Hulk take over, and Arlo stayed in control enough to be able to hear what actually really happened. You were able to listen to Arya and know that it wasn't malicious intent and that she wasn't trying to be disrespectful. She just, like many of us, wasn't thinking, was just, again, apply this to your everyday life. How many times we assume someone did something or they said something when really it's like, oh my gosh, like, I'm sorry. Like, I was just in my own little world. I wasn't even thinking. But we take it so personal and then we get so angry and then we hold on to this for days, weeks, months, years go by when really it was just a misunderstanding. If we would have just talked about it, it would have cleared it up. But we don't, because of our own childhood wounds, because the fear of confrontation, because of the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of all of the things. And so, yes, this is a little moment about 2 kids and kinetic sand, but apply this to your adult life and look at areas in your life where it's like, wow, if I would have just asked for clarification, if I wouldn't have flew off the handle, maybe I could have taken a moment to ask them what they really meant when they said that, or what they meant when they did that. Because we might find out that it had nothing to do with us. Nothing to do with us. And that they were going through their own thing. And like, oh, wow, I made that about me, when really they were going through their own stuff. That also happened last week when I had that little lesson of like, So it was a good reminder, good self-check. But anyway, I want you to think about that. If we were just able to pause and not let our ego take over and react so quickly, where could we have sat in it enough to hear what the other person had to say? So then we could sort it out, think about it, come up with another solution moving forward. Because when Arlo did that, I said, Arlo, do you know what happened? When you stayed in control and when you stayed calm and you stayed emotionally regulated and you listened and you heard what Arya had to say, you realized she didn't mean any disrespect by it, and you kept your cool about it, what happened? He's like, she asked if I wanted to play kinetic sand in the morning. I'm like, yeah. Like immediate good karma. Boom. Because I said, what would have happened if you would have stepped on her brush? He's like, oh, she would have been mad. Yep. I'm like, and do you think you two would be playing kinetic sand in the morning? No, he says. Probably never. That's what he said. Probably never again. Yeah. So it was just such a cool moment right there in real time to be able to replay that back to him. And this is part of what we need to do for ourselves, but also with your kids, is when you see these things happen, point them out, notice it, because now I want him to have that as a core memory. I want him to have that memory of what happened when Arlo stayed in control, when Arlo stayed grounded. Because when he did, something really cool happened. There was a gift at the end of that, and that gift was quality time with his sister, which he loves. If he would have let Hulk take over, that would have ended terribly. Terribly. So it was just this really cool moment, and it was just, I don't know, I just felt like all the good feels, like what had happened with my kids. And I said to Arlo, I'm like, you remember when we told you that your teacher said that you were one of the most emotionally intelligent kids in her first grade class? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, this is what she was talking about, Arlo. This right here, what you did today, when you noticed that Arya was trying to manipulate you and you said something about it and you stood up for yourself and said, don't do that to me. But also what you just did right now is you felt triggered. You almost reacted, but instead you took a minute, you responded, you stayed grounded, and look what happened. I'm like, this is what she was talking about, Arlo. And he was just like, you could feel his energy was just like, oh, it was such a good feeling. And so I was okay, we are far from perfect over here, but we are doing some good things. And so those are some cool healing moments. And one of the other ones I had mentioned earlier was that you can hold two truths at once. And I think this is so important because for so many of us, for so many years, most of our lifetime, it's felt like all or nothing, either or. And we forget that it can be that I can be angry at you and still love you. I can be frustrated with you and still love you. And I want us to remember that most of all, we need to be able to do that for ourselves. I can be frustrated with where I'm at and still love that I am not giving up. You may not be where you want to be in your career or in your health goals and motivated to do differently. We can be upset and joyful at the same time. We can be grieving and still feel gratitude. It can be and. And the more that we can continue to expand this range of emotions that we feel safe to feel, the better. That we don't get trapped in this little box where I only feel safe feeling some happiness and maybe, a little disappointment. When really that range, it's big. It's big. And when I was at this conference on Wednesday, they had the little feelings wheel. If you've ever seen that on Pinterest or whatever, it shows you like in the center of this wheel, the basic ones, right? The happy, sad, the ones that we're all used to. But then that wheel, there was another circle from that and then another circle. And it was like a million different emotions and feelings. And like, we can name 5. It's like, no, like I looked at that wheel and I'm like, I'm feeling all of these. And I feel safe feeling all of these now. I did not before. I felt safe maybe feeling 2 or 3 of those. Only if they were good ones, right? The other half of that wheel, nope, not going there. That's when I'll binge eat. That's when I'll overexercise, or that's when I'll do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's the goal, right? In healing is that I can look at this whole wheel, whole range of emotions and know that I can feel safe within all of them, moving through all of them, feeling all of them. And then when you do that, you allow a safe space for other people to do the same. It allowed my kids to be able to do the same thing. It allows for people to feel comfortable and safe feeling their emotions around me. Like it just naturally creates that safe space because like, oh, well, you feel safe in your emotions. So if I bring over my grief, my pain, you can help me with that? Like, yeah, because I feel comfortable sitting in mine. I'm happy to help sit with you in yours. And I think about that in the work that I do, like that's what I'm doing. And I will feel it with you. I have been on coaching calls and I am full on crying with you. Like I'm feeling all the feels. And I now know that I need to, do my own energetic care and things after that. But I feel safe and comfortable in being able to do that. And I think before I actually probably felt more comfortable doing that for other people before I did for myself. Whoa, that was a big realization. Ooh. How many of you, how many of you do that too? Where you can be that person for everybody else. Everyone else can bring on their pain. They can bring on all of the hard feelings. They come to you for things and you can hold space for them and you can help them and you help them move through it. And they feel better when you're around. But if you were to turn that same thing, like, do you feel safe in your own emotions? Ooh, yeah. Again, you might be a pro. I mean, think about that. How many times can we help other people? And that was actually something that came up in the coaching call with this woman as well, is that with some transitions and things happening at work, she's been very financially independent. That has been something she was very set on from childhood. And there's a whole story behind that of like wanting to be financially independent, not wanting to depend on anyone. Well, there's going to be some shifts and transitioning happening at work, which could feel like, why is this happening to me? When her and I both know, because this has been kind of this ongoing thing. I feel like God's bringing out the big guns. Like, okay, you wouldn't leave when this happened. You wouldn't leave when this happened. Well, guess what? Now I'm restructuring your entire company. And so maybe we'll give you a severance package. You better hope so. Like, I would get on board with what God's got planned for you right now and hop onto that severance package board before you just get the boot without anything. I'd be like, okay, God, I trust you, but maybe sending me along with some of that would be great. You might want to start manifesting that versus like, why is this staying in that stuck of why is this happening to me? No, this is happening for me. I said, I'm like, God is shifting your entire organization to get you out of there. And he maybe even give you some money to do it. Like, what else do you want? Oh, you need the exact exit strategy plan and know where you're going. It's not going to work that way. He's like, I need you to trust me now. Like, I'm even giving you a life raft. Come on. Come on. Work with me here. But what was so interesting is that what was so hard to wrap her head around was there might be a time period where she might have to rely on her husband's income a little bit more. And that was like, nope, immediately shut down. Not doing it. Can't, nope. And I was like, well, what if the tables were reversed? Energy completely shifted. Oh, absolutely. 100% I would do that. Not even a question. Not even a question. If he was going through a work transition and trying to figure out his life path and purpose or whatever, even just a job transition, without a doubt, no hesitation at all, she would do that for him. Tables reversed? Nope. Not a chance in hell. I was like, ooh, that's interesting. And she knew it too. You could see her ego literally swooped in. You could energetically, you just felt it. She even did this thing in the camera like, nope. No. Oh, that's totally an ego hand move. I love her so much. And she felt it. And I was like, so how does your inner child feel about that? The fact that you were so willing to help someone else in the exact same situation, but you were dead set on not receiving that help yourself. What kid does that feel good to? You're in a room full of kids and all these other kids are getting all of the help, all of the support that they need. And then there's one kid over here like, nope, not you. Nope, not you. No, because then you would be weak. No, all these other kids are absolutely worthy of it. 100% they're worthy of this help and support. Why wouldn't this teacher give them these tools, this support, this kind of love, this kind of compassion, but not you? Nope, you stay over there. You better figure this out yourself. Ooh, and then she felt that, man. She felt that and the tears came. That's exactly what she was doing. But here's the thing. That is what her ego told her she had to do. And when she was little, yes, ego helped her in those moments become more fierce, become more independent, because in some ways she had to. But is that what her inner child wanted? No. Her inner child wanted to be over there with everyone else who got the same kind of love and respect and care and nurturing that every other kid got from their parents, from their teachers. It didn't want to have to do that. But ego's like, I didn't know what else to do to get you through that. So yes, did it serve a purpose when she was younger? Yes, 100%. Is it now to her detriment? Yes, because it is keeping her stuck in a job she no longer belongs in and is creating a disconnect between her and her husband. of being able to fully trust, to be able to let him in, to be the provider, to be the protector. How can you be in your feminine energy when you're coming from that space? And how can he be in his masculine? You can't. You completely distorted that whole energetic exchange. But what was so interesting, because right before this, she told me a story about how they were sitting down for dinner and she was actually vulnerable. She was actually vulnerable for once about where she was and what she was feeling. And he was able to meet her and show up for her. And it felt really good. So we just had this conversation acknowledging this, like, wow, when you actually let him in, he could support you in the ways that you have wanted. But it took you bringing down your guard, your wall, in order to let him in. So she knew that and was like, okay, that's cool. But then a couple minutes later, nope, nope, can't do it. So it's like, but you just said that when you let him help you, it felt really good. And it felt good to be loved and supported and nurtured. And that's actually what your inner child has always wanted. But yet you are now, as an adult, denying her of that. And now that's you doing it. Like your ego is still trying to do that. And now you, adult you, needs to say, no, hold up, no. We still deserve that same love and support. And this is where we can reparent and let that little girl know that you always were worthy of that love and support. You shouldn't have had to figure it out by yourself. You didn't have to do it alone. You should have been able to trust and rely on other people. But that taught you some really important things about you and that you are resilient and that you can get through those. So again, some great benefits that have gotten her to a pretty cool place in her life. But at some point that pendulum swings too far. And I want you to look at that in your adult life, is where have those same coping strategies and mechanisms and things that we did as protection as a little kid might be able to see in areas of your life where that helped you. Again, being the overachiever. That's absolutely helped some people in their lives, right? But at what point does that pendulum swing too far and now you're at burnout? Now you've put work over your family all the time because you got to achieve at work, you got to strive at work, you got to prove things at work, but then your family life is suffering or your health is suffering. The pendulum swings too far. Ego took it too far. And this is what was happening. And she was able to see that and hopefully sit in it some more. And so if we can look at those things, and again, this is all these like, whoa, cool healing moments. And when you allow yourself to sit in that place and be vulnerable, that is healing in itself. And so in so many ways, there were so many non-scale victories within all of that. And when we know that when we're doing this healing within, whatever your goals are, whether it's a career goal or a health goal or something like that, it will start to show up on the outside. I heard this quote earlier today and I was like, whoa, this is so good. In that your outside world is an inside job. What is reflected on the outside, whether that's in your career. And this was a reel about self-worth. And what is on the outside is reflecting back of how we feel on the inside, whether that's, again, with your career, with your relationships, with your body, with your health. It really is all a reflection of our self-worth. And so that made me even sit back like, okay, like I know at one point when I didn't feel worthy, there's layers to that too, right? I was 40 pounds overweight and I was emotionally binge eating and putting food in my body that didn't feel good and all of those things because I didn't feel worthy, right? So I was like, well, here you get these scraps. Here you get this, shitty food. Now I'm like, oh, no. I'm only putting good things in here. I know what my body's worth, right? And then, as you all know, that worthiness wound, there's many layers to that. And I have shared that on here many times. Now into relationships, realizing that within my marriage. And that was another big one, going deeper and deeper into that wound to know what I was actually worthy of. And then in my career, and that's always like the last one. And so I was like, okay, I know that that is also a reflection in the work I have to continue to do. But the fact that I'm willing to do it, willing to look at it. That was another quote. It said, no one likes ghosts or being ghosted, but we all got tons of them in our closet. Like, what are you afraid to look at? What ghost in your life are you afraid to look at? What childhood wounds? What trauma? What things are you like, oh, nope, I don't want to go there. I don't want to look at that. That's too scary. Because then you're going to stay stuck there. That level of self-worth is going to stay stuck. And now you've created your own ceiling in whatever area of your life that is. And part of that healing is knowing that you're going to be okay because you got you. You got you. Like I got me now. And I felt like I got a little extra, like, yeah, you do this weekend. And that was really important for me to know that. And again, it just felt like, whoa, all of these things happened this week. It kind of cleared away some major debris in a sense to be able to now like, whoa, see this. And I'm recording this on a new moon, which is all about manifesting and all of these things. And so I thought it's always perfect timing. It's always divine timing in that if you are sensitive to energy out there, and I know a lot of you are that watch, that's why you're probably drawn to me and you're highly sensitive and all of those things, like you're my people, that's why you're here, is you probably felt that. So if this last week kind of felt like this emotional roller coaster, that's why God and the universe, like, I've got to help you work through this stuff because I want you to be ready. I want you to be able to ready to harness this new energy that's coming in, this really grounded energy that's coming in. And that's Taurus energy. And I'm not going to go off on all of the, like, what all of those different signs mean, but that very much is about getting really solid, really grounded, which reminds me of this little ad I can throw in here right now about my grounding sheet. So I will actually, heck, why not? Again, if you follow my social media over the summer and the fall, I would often share little pictures of me outside grounding, just my feet in the grass or whatever, knowing how important it was for me to connect with Mother Earth. And there's actual physical benefits to doing that. Well, I live in Wisconsin, wintertime, what are you going to do? And so there are things out there like these little grounding mats that I'm sitting on right now, and you just plug it into your outlet. Just like if you were an electrician, you know, you have to ground that. So energy is not all over the place. And so that grounding mat is what that is. And I have one on my bed and I have one that I sit on all the time. And it's just a simple little thing that I plug into an outlet and just helping, not going to make any claims or whatever I got to say here to cover my ass. But just things that I have noticed. And actually, my nephew, who is a college football player, was curious when I was talking about it. And he got one because he's studying all the time. He's sitting all the time. And that's where I was too. Like, I watched this video, which I will include the link to this video because it was like, whoa, what? In that, I'm going to like create a whole long episode and I shouldn't. But I have to talk about this now. In that, when you think about how life has changed over the last hundreds and thousands of years. Our ancestors were walking around barefoot on the earth all the time, always connected. And now, not only are we walking around cement all the time, we also have our shoes on all the time. We are barely, ever, rarely connecting with earth. And we're in schools and we're in buildings and we're in all these things that keep us away from being able to connect with Mother Nature. And maybe that was their whole point. That's a whole other podcast. They know, like, oh, they know if we get them connected to Mother Earth and really anchored into that, they're going to know some stuff and they're going to remember some things. And I feel like those of us that are connecting back to our roots, no pun intended, are waking up, are realizing like, whoa, 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 what is going on around us? So I find that really important. But this video was talking about how these scientists realize the importance of grounding and how that impacts our physical health. And this guy was like, I'm making sure I'm grounding like 90% of the day, 99% of the day. And I was like, whoa, what? I'm going out for 5 minutes. That's not enough. So I was like, I am. I'm also sitting at my desk all the time. Like, why wouldn't I just get a grounding mat? But going back to my nephew, he's like, I feel like I've noticed a lot less like aches and pains because he's a football player and he's a lineman and he's getting, tossed around and punched around. Like, he's doing the tossing. Let's be honest here. He's the man. I was like, oh my gosh, how cool that my, 20-year-old nephew got a grounding mat and noticed physically that he was just kind of feeling a little better. Wasn't as achy and wasn't as painful. And whether your people are sleeping better, all of the things. So I'll list a link here. You can watch that video. I'll also put the link here for that grounding mat if you want to give it a try. And it's like one of the like subtle things. You're not going to sit and be like, whoa, like blast off. And all of a sudden, like all of your illnesses and things are cured. But that was also part of the video is all of these things that grounding could help us with, could just naturally help improve our health. But again, why aren't these things mainstream? Why don't we know about these things? So again, a whole other podcast. So I'm going to end on that, I think. See, you can understand my squirrel moments. I mean, they're all kind of related. That the wild ass one was not related to anything, but did get me into trouble. But it all happened for me because of the cool moment that happened afterwards. So I'm gonna leave it on that. And yeah, I hope you got something out of this. And I would love for you to share if there has been a healing moment that you have noticed, even if it was, oh, I took a pause, or oh, I noticed I was triggered, or oh, I took some time to respond, so I didn't react, or I just whatever little non-scale victory, your healing victory, something could be the smallest little thing. I would love for you to comment on YouTube if you're watching, or if you're listening, there's spots for you to comment. I would love for you to share that, or send me a message on social media or through whatever. I love to hear these things and would love to keep this conversation going and continue to notice these things. Again, going back to the conversation with Arlo, when I took time to bring it back around and help him really notice, that's when he could anchor into that. Oh yeah, that really cool thing happened with Aria when I stayed. Yeah. And we all need to do that. We all need to remember those moments, anchor into those moments, because it's so easy. I could get caught up in that one icky moment that I had with Aria, and it could block me from all of the other amazing moments that we've had. Because that's what we tend to do, right? You get 1,000 great reviews and one negative comment, and all you can focus is on the negative comment. No. And you're going to have that a lot on your journey throughout life. So you have to take notice. And I believe Wendy talked about that when she writes down the things that she's grateful for, 3 things that she's grateful for every day. She can anchor into that. And that just puts you in a totally different state of energy, but to really notice those things when they happen and to celebrate them, to share them. And maybe that's just in your own little journal or just taking the moment yourself. Sometimes I'll put my hand on my heart or I'll look up and be like, thank you. Thank you for that. And that might be it. That might be all I need to do. But that to me is like planting a little bit more of those seeds. It's like, yeah, I want that. I want more of that. I want that to grow. So when you notice, think of it as like you're planting that seed. What are you going to focus on? Because what you focus on is what is going to grow. So be really intentional about those seeds that you are planting, what you notice, plant those, and then water those. Do more of those things. Also, why you got to keep weeding the garden and tending to that as well, right? This is my favorite quote, and I'll end on this. Your mind is a garden. Your thoughts are the seeds. You can plant flowers or you can plant weeds. So be sure to take notice of those moments, of those healing moments. Plant those in, get those in, and then start watering the hell out of them. Okay, on that note, please share your non-scale victory with me or tell me what seeds that you are going to plant that are going to turn into those beautiful flowers and find that way to love and nurture your inner child as always. And I will see you next week, hopefully with that big announcement. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate this exchange of energy more than you know. So thank you for showing up for you and for your inner child. Until next week.